My name is Heather Hilz-Fitzgerald. I'm excited for you to be part of this session today, and hopefully you have access to the bit.ly that I posted in the chat. And before we get started, just kind of reaching out to you in the sense of just checking in. And so it's great to kind of see where everybody is from, and so and understand where they're at within their career, such as their teaching position. And so go ahead and in the chat bar, if you would like to, go ahead and introduce yourself. Maybe tell us where you're located, your position, and then also you can go ahead and take a look at this question where it says, when was the last time you were so into your work that time flew by? And even though we have closures at this point with our schools for the past few months, I still feel that there's been so much going on. So if you want to go ahead and participate in that, that would be great. And then we'll get started in about 2 more minutes. Hello. So I'm just kind of getting us started with a nice little icebreaker, having people go ahead and share who they are, where they're located. Feel free to do that in the chat section. And then also, if you would like to respond to this little icebreaker question, when was the last time you were so into your work that time flew by? Go ahead and place your response in the chat bar if you would like to. So I see Perlita is here, hi. And then Karen, I see you, obviously. There's your little Bitmoji. And I will put the bit.ly to the presentation one more time in the chat so that everybody has access. And just a reminder that within these presentations, they're all hyperlinked. Mostly the images that you see, or if you see documents or examples or samples of things, all of those are hyperlinked, meaning that you can have access to that and use the resources however you would like. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and, oh, hey, Amber.
Hi.
Nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. So Amber was with me last session on Monday. We were kind of the lone souls within the presentation. So it was great to have just kind of that time to talk and collaborate with one another in real time. That was really cool. So Amber, feel free to go ahead and put your name in the chat bar as well, where you're located, your position, Feel free to respond to that checking in icebreaker question if you would like to. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're at 4:02, so might as well move it along because these 45 minutes do go by pretty quickly. So we have a nice small group once again, but you know, small groups get a lot done, right? Gives us opportunity to really reflect with one another if necessary and share ideas or practices. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And I'll be toggling back and forth with some of the resources that I'll be sharing today. So I apologize if there's any visual, interruptions or anything like that. Again, my name's Heather Hilz-Fitzgerald. I'm here in California. I'm an ed tech coach. I've been in the educational realm for about 10 years, and this has been my first year, this last year, as our ed tech instructional coach within the Romoland School District. We are a very small district, only 5 schools, 4 of them elementary, 1 of them a middle school, but we do have one-to-one devices for the past, 5 years for grades 3 through 8th, and then 2-to-1 for TK through 2nd. So obviously we are very much motivated to help support our students through the use of technology. And then obviously now with our school closures and seeing how we're definitely having a shift in instruction, it's actually pretty amazing how quick everything changed. And now that people who are already using EdTech in the past are already able to really, go gung-ho with what they were doing. But now we do notice too that we have a lot of educators who are seeking more knowledge behind EdTech, and so that's a really great thing for us. So today, our presentation is ultimately really looking at creating meaningful learning experiences for our students. And so going down to the bare bones foundation of what we're actually doing when we're instructing our students. We're gonna look at the pedagogy behind online learning. We're going to review some samples of some structures that you could provide for your students during a distance learning model, and then just looking also at different instructional practices and or strategies to support those learners. So one thing I wanted to go ahead and just mention at this point is that there are some really great things to remember that are they're like your top 3 goals when it comes to online learning. And from just being part of different county-wide sessions out here in Riverside, I really took away these 3 ideas, but really creating that routine and structure for your students. And so we'll be looking at some ideas on how to do that with some of the templates that I'll be sharing with you guys today. But another thing too, which was very eye-opening, and even just having conversations with teachers who are in the classroom, looking at less is more. So are we putting this out for our students for them to just have busy work and attack some type of online learning program? Really what we're seeing is that if you're gonna put something out to your students, cut that in half, and then again, maybe cut that even more in half, because we really need to be aware of what's taking place in their home life. We also need to be aware of, the family support and whatnot. And so less is more. So being very specific to your goals, which then stem back to your standards, is what is going to be your go-to. And then ultimately, because we know that that with the transition to online learning, one of the biggest irks from teachers that I hear too is the motivation and the engagement with their students. So instead of just pushing out some type of online learning program, which obviously, yes, those things are intended to support our students, but we need to start thinking about that grander experience of learning where we're creating experiences for our students that are real world, that make connection to their interests. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so pedagogy, right? How many of you are using something like Wonders in your district, or some type of, obviously some type of curriculum program? We have either units of study that have been developed for us within our district. We do have units of study for both our ELA and math, but we do have core curriculum which comes from Wonders and Go Math. But our teachers are allowed to kind of have leeway as to how they're going to utilize those materials. They're not necessarily having to follow Wonders or Go Math, you know, through the pacing guide. They can kind of be creative in that manner. So really looking now from that curriculum base, and how are we going to then now translate that into an online learning experience. And so really what I think is the biggest and the most important thing to do during this time period when we transition to something that might look different for the fall is to be really familiar with what your standards are going to look like for the trimesters. So one thing I want to go ahead and share that was done within my district just a few weeks ago, and we're still kind of in the process of you know, really narrowing down the standards. We're going to do this through TK through 8th grade, but we're looking to map out the first trimester, and then from there really look at creating units, particularly bi-weekly units. And the reason why is because obviously we need to know what our priority standards are. There's a lot of times where, you know, there's so much fluff within those curriculums that we have. We really need to narrow it down to what is really necessary that our students are going to need to know. And remember, again, that less is more concept. So really honing in on those focus standards will allow us to dive deep into what those students need per grade level. And so I'm going to go ahead and hover over to this priority standards map that we have created. And obviously this was not done, you know, by one individual. We have a team of coaches that are generally, you know, subject matter experts. And so we banded together to create this as a guideline for teachers. We did look at our units of study. We did look at Wonders. We did look at our math units of study. And then from there, we went in and plugged in the different standards that could be focused on, pretty much about one standard per week or two. And then if you notice, we've also included the science and social studies. We have a team of science TOSAs that have developed an amazing NGSS science units for our entire district. And so we're constantly trying to infuse that cross-curricular approach. So you'll notice that the language arts and the math are core and key, right, with those priority standards. But then we also want to include those other subjects, which sometimes can get, you know, pushed to the side when we're in the classroom, but really looking at your science and social studies as the core literature that you're going to be pulling from, and or those engaging project-based learning or real-world experiences that you can create either half of the time when you're in the classroom with students and or when they're online at home. So this is just a way to kind of map out what is your actual unit going to look like when it comes to teaching digitally online. Because that, I mean, that's why we're here, right? We're here to teach these standards to the students. And again, what I thought was really great about this when we came together to collaborate with just the coaching team, we then actually had meetings with grade level teams, but you really get to see a sense of collective efficacy amongst your teachers in a way for them to research the standards and then collaborate with one another so that everyone is being a part of the process to really streamline what learning is going to look like. So does anybody have any questions about priority standards, or have you guys done something similar to that, similar in this sense with your transition to online learning?
Hi.
Karen?
We haven't started yet, but how long did this take your team to get together? Because we have like 2 weeks.
I know. Okay, so to be honest with you, this is kind of what rolled out. This was, I believe, 2 weeks ago. We were approached on a Monday as the coaching team, and we have, let's see, like 7 of us all together. And then we divided and conquered to decide upon who was going to take what. But because we already had the units of study in place for language arts and math, those were actually pretty easy to plug in because the priority standards were very prominent. So, and so they were pretty much like experts too in those areas, the ELA and the math, to know which ones are going to be the legit ones to do within each of those weeks. We did then meet up with teachers at the end of that week, but we did have a little hiccup in continuing to move forward through all of this because of, like contract type of things and, duty time and stuff like that. But I would say like one of the teachers or one of the coaches that had worked on this, he said like he probably spent 2 hours to do a few grade level spans. But I mean, I really believe in collective efficacy. So I'm really thinking that as long as you're getting a group of educators who are gung-ho, who are experts within these different subject areas and are ready to go ahead and, pave the way for these learning plans for the next year, I think you can get them done in a pretty substantial time, as long as you're making like little cohorts, right?
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Are you guys trying to have something ready for next year? Is that what that is?
Yes. So we have a meeting tomorrow with all the supervisors and coaches, and then we're going to go from there.
Great.
So this was perfect timing, actually.
Yeah. And feel free to, use this template right here, or just share it with,
Okay.
your team to see like if this is something that would be useful for you guys.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so moving on. Obviously now, our standards are the what we're teaching. And that's what that's like kind of my go-to saying is like, okay, so the standards are what, but like, how are we going to teach? And so one of the things that we really wanted to look at as a district was creating a standardized learning plan or template. And the reason for that is because if you think about your families at home, if they have multiple students, having that similarity within the the home of the template of what they need to access and to complete is very beneficial. We had a lot of parents kind of a little confused as to what their kindergartner was doing compared to what maybe their 6th grader was doing. And so, and some of the county sessions that I had attended, I kind of gravitated towards these learning plans as well. And in my own classroom experience, I really, obviously used the idea of hyper slides or hyper docs as a way to house the different assignments that I would be giving to my students. I'm actually a really big advocate for blended learning. Station rotations was like my thing. And I usually would create, thematic station rotations that would incorporate all subjects. And within that, the activities would be linked for students. So this is something that was developed. You guys have probably seen the little Bitmoji classrooms. Does anybody have a Bitmoji classroom that they've created yet? They're out on the Twitterverse. They're really cute. So that was a nice way to kind of just engage or spark the excitement or motivation for your students. And also these Bitmoji classrooms also serve as tools for your students. So if you're like in a middle school setting or even in a 5th grade setting where you're looking at, the periodic table, these are things that are all clickable that could actually support your students. And that little thing down there, those are virtual manipulatives for mathematics. So using everything you have within your template for support for students is quite important. We then wanted to house, all of that work that we did with those priority standards and mapping those out. We wanted to then be able to house an area for students to understand what their actual learning goals are. And then again, this was based on a bi-weekly template that we decided upon for our trimesters, or our trimester. So we would have had, I think it was 6 units and bi-weekly. So, you would have your 12 weeks covered. And then, so your learning goals would be addressed here. And then down below, you could, script them out into that success criteria and learning targets, so your students are quite clear of what they're completing. Another element that we added into this, because obviously there's going to be a ton of online tools and apps, and this is just a page to really familiarize parents too with what these different icons are. A Kahoot to a quizzes, a Pear Deck, an Edpuzzle. So this is just a nice place for people to. I see Amber. Amber, you're all good. Don't worry about it. I totally get it. I have a 5 and a 2-year-old, so I don't even know how I'm awake right now. But this is a really great way for parents to just be aware of the things that their students are going to be accessing. We utilize iReady in our district, and the last 2 years we've been very gung-ho on students being aware of their own goals and tracking their success. So this would definitely be a great addition to your learning plan, where students could go ahead and document, if you have some type of an online learning program, what type of lessons they were doing, and how well they passed. Because this is a great talking tool for when your teachers do meet up with your students, either face-to-face or virtually, to talk about what areas might we need to get support in, and or have a reteachable moment right then and there. Okay, so then this goes into the actual template that's going to house all of the assignments and or tasks for the week. Now, I've modeled this template off of Catlin Tucker's idea of using the 5 E's. The 5 E's, I think, are just a really great way to structure learning. Obviously, we see them a lot of times within our science, social studies, but it could be used in so many other ways, because if we're trying to really focus on that cross-curricular approach, we shouldn't segregate the subject matter away from each other. Let's try to infuse it as best as we can. So we start with engage, and then within this, you have your reading, writing, math, and then you have those connections to science and social studies. And that's where you're going to have to really support yourself as an educator, and or if you are a coach, really support them in really looking at their science and social study standards and finding some type of a connection that would ultimately blend really well with what you're trying to have the students engage in for the 2 weeks. So if you notice too, we have a 2-day schedule for the students to complete here. So that also then leads into our idea of UDL, Universal Design Learning, giving that voice and choice to your students as to how they're gonna complete their work and when they're gonna complete it. And that being said too, all of these templates, as long as you have your core template, these could definitely be modified for students with IEPs or with your English learners, but just making this very flexible so it's user-friendly for all students. The other thing that you'll notice too down below, you can incorporate other subject areas if necessary, and or there's another area for students just to reflect based on what they're engaging in for the week. again, so then your next day is going to be explore, which is the second E in the 5 E's model. You would include information there as well within all the subject areas. But if you notice, everything is very similar in the template. It hasn't changed at all. So students are going to be, comfortable with navigating this template. Day 5 would be your Friday. And what we're seeing is that this Friday date is a great way for teachers to check in. So not really relying on continuous work, but maybe this is a day where you can, do your one-on-one meets with your students and or do a whole group check-in. But this gives an opportunity for students to catch up if necessary. Then you would go into your Monday, Tuesday with the explain. Again, elaborate on those next 2 days. And last but not least, that last Friday, an evaluative type of scenario, whether you're doing some type of a performance task, or we're looking at some writing pieces that you have already gone and looked at for the students, and then giving them one-on-one feedback. Just an idea. This is just the method to the madness of my crazy brain of setting up what might be a good weekly learning plan for your students. Have you all done anything in your own districts or schools to create some type of templates like this as well? I wanted to, well, go ahead.
I was just going to say some of our teachers did do something very similar, especially at the elementary schools. Using Google Slides was their form. I like how yours is more organized, though. But something very similar where they had the days broken down by slides,
right,
and then they could build from them.
Yes, I had with a neighboring district with I worked with grades 4th through 5th of like an entire district, and they were amazing. They came together collectively and really scripted out these different slide decks. But that's kind of the theme that I'm also seeing, with housing these learning plans, and then just being a mother of a kindergartner. I thought about what I was creating for him at home, and then kind of took in whatever resources that I recently have been seeing within county and or state level or nationwide level from other educators, and just thought this would be a really great way to go ahead and keep everything organized and streamlined. And I want to mention too that whenever you're creating these and there's hyperlinks in them, those hyperlinks could be linked to the Google Classroom assignment. So obviously you have, your template here that shares what you need to complete that day. But if those students click on that hyperlink, it will take them directly to that Google Classroom assignment, which then that's easier for you as an educator to go in and, look through their work, give feedback and assess. I've also included these templates too, if you guys need them. One is a single subject. It's pretty much similar to the upper grade template. It just is leaving the subject by itself. And then down below is something that I created for primary students, which I actually had used for my own son while developing something that would, be user-friendly for us here at home. Okay. Any other questions? Or I know, Amber, you're good? You're good? Yeah. Okay. So besides housing the learning plan, which is kind of just, structuring and scheduling what your week is going to look like, we then obviously have instruction and or assignments or tasks that we need to go ahead and push out. And if we're in that digital realm, what are the most effective ways that you're going to be able to instruct your students. And so I just gave some general ideas of things that we could use. I know when Amber and I met last on Monday, I mentioned to her EduProtocols. Perlita or Karen, are you familiar with EduProtocols?
Yes, I am actually. There was a great workshop that he gave for GEG Global
Yeah.
last week. It was really
Oh,
it was
was he
great.
on there last week?
I'm sorry?
John was on the GEG last week?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
man,
It's
I
all on
missed it.
YouTube, so you can watch it if you missed it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've actually I'm part of the whole Google Trainer thing and the GEG thing, and I wanted to like really dive in, with our SoCal people, but I feel like there's just so much going on right now that I'm like juggling. So I just try to catch whatever snippet I can of what's going on out there, and there's always just amazing stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's great too.
Oh gosh, yes, John is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, if you're not familiar with EduProtocols, I'm telling you, it was life-changing for me. I attended the Q session in spring when the book was first released, and I didn't know really, that was actually my first time being to Q. And I then sat in on the EduProtocols session, and I bought the book, and I started using the strategies in my classroom right away. So some of the things that can be incorporated in your instruction would be these EduProtocols. They don't necessarily, they're not necessarily just like standalone activities. Like they could be modified or, restructured to however you need them to work in your classroom. So one of the ideas would be, implementing Bokakucha. And remember, all of these are hyperlinked. But Bokakucha is pretty much an online book report that you can connect literary elements to and allow students to dive in deep as to what they're reading. And then they could go ahead and also then at the end present what they have read and or how they have inferred or analyzed the text. And we know that presentation during an online in an online environment, maybe you're going to do it at a Google Meet or use Screencastify or also Flipgrid, which are recording tools. And those are really great tools for our students to practice their speaking and listening skills, and then a way for them to share and connect with students, because if they're using Flipgrid, they can go back and comment. So keep those in mind when we're trying to make those connections and support our students' verbal and listening skills. The other thing is that because you're in an online environment, it's very important that we incorporate as much multimedia that we can, because we have to think about our students who don't always have access to the written word and or to print. And so videos can be so beneficial to our students, making sure that they're being engaged by videos that spark interest, and then just making it accessible for students. So this was an activity created where students would go ahead and watch a video, and then from there they could go ahead and finish the story. A lot of times on our SBAC tests and our state assessment, Karen, because I know you're in New Jersey, you see those test questions coming up where they give you a snippet of the story and then you have to finish it. So I always was trying to create those type of opportunities for students to have those, constructed responses in real time, but including that multimedia makes it a little bit more fun. Another tool that is really great that could be a really long project would be using Google Tour Builder. These are great. This is a great tool to demonstrate narratives, do an informational report. It pretty much allows you to move around the entire world and plug in text, photos. There's amazing things you can do with Google Tour Builder. Has anybody used Google Tour Builder before?
I've used it for when I do hyperdocs, like I use that as this packaging
Nice.
for it. Hmm.
Oh, cool. So then, so people like travel through the hyperdoc of the tour builder that you created?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the topic. So it might be, travel through a book, the locations of a book, or we did one on, I worked with a teacher, she made one all throughout Egypt, which was great.
Yes, yes. And it's really fun too when you ask students to create narratives, because sometimes they take you to different parts of the world and have such really lavish stories, and it's really fun
Hmm.
and very user friendly. I'm telling you, my third and fourth grade, when I was back in third and fourth grade, they were able to dive into it. Moving on to driving instruction ideas for math. Again, going back to our EDUCATE protocols, obviously we want to create these grand learning experiences for our students. So I'm really a big advocate of incorporating real world problems within mathematics right then and there with your students, getting them to collaborate. But there's sometimes that we still need to practice those concepts and procedures. So EDUCATE protocols math rep strategy would be a great way for students to work with numbers based on maybe a scaffold-like approach for just practicing skills and or practicing new skills. One really cool idea too is to have students maybe create their own math reps and then share with students that they are working with either in partners or small groups. Remembering that Google Apps, I know Amber is, her district is Google affiliated, and Karen, obviously you're Google too. But remember that our Google Apps are really here to support our students. And so thinking about mathematics, especially when it comes to geometry and developing shapes, developing equations and things like that, rather than using pen and paper or pencil and paper, which sometimes I knew that was a struggle for some of my students who didn't have the penmanship that they particularly wanted. But giving them access to Google Slides or Google Drawing, they could wow me with some of the stuff that they created, and then the frustration was less. And then last but not least, one of the ideas, and obviously this is something that many teachers are now being familiar with, but videoing your lessons. The biggest thing that students need at this point is teacher presence, and it's so much more meaningful when you as the teacher take the time to record a mini lesson, and especially when it comes to mathematics, walking them through that process. And yes, we can do that in a Google Meet, but sometimes students need that ability to go back and rewind and pause to make sure that they're understanding everything that you're sharing with them. Are there any other ideas of driving instruction during this time for either ELA or math that you guys would like to share? We're good? Nice. Okay, so last but not least, again, going back to that cross-curricular approach. So for myself as an educator, I really thought thematically when it came to my classroom units. The social studies and the science content were the core. They were the driving force of what my students would experience in the classroom. And so using that as like your beam of light as a topic is going to be your best friend at this point, because then from there you can take in the creative approach of how are you going to connect your ELA standards and your math standards into those social studies and science concepts. And so really thinking on a grander term of what type of experiences am I going to provide for my students that are hands-on, that are engaging, that they are going to be able to do independently. So a lot of times, like I said, I was a blended learning teacher using station rotations. My stations were multifaceted with like really big ideas for each station. Each station would take at least 3 to 5 days to finish. And we did things such as creating websites based on national parks. We could have students record themselves making advertisements based on journeying to Mars, but thinking of ways to take it to the next level of engagement with your students, even though you are still not face to face. And some of that might also be for us to film ourselves doing some pretty grand experiences as well, such as your science-like experiments. Are there any things recently that you've been creating in your own classrooms that are considered to be grand, I guess, during this time? I think Amber had shared on Monday that, she was working with her students on, they were creating kind of a shared slide deck of, I forget the project, but, just giving the opportunity for collaboration during this time period is extremely important. So this is kind of where our last hitting point, but I know we say with our students that voice and choice is extremely important. So therefore, giving voice and choice to our teachers is also extremely important. I shared my previous learning template up above, which was based off the 5 E's. But since I've had time to collaborate and work with teachers virtually through these closure times, I've been able to compile quite a bit of examples based on what type of schedules work best for students and especially for teachers, because we have to be mindful of, this is their craft, this is their pedagogy, and so make it your own first. And I know we're like done pretty quickly. Well, we still have about 7 minutes left, but I just want to leave. Oh yeah, wait, I see it, Amber. It was a theme park design. I love that. And then I'm just thinking, like, if you were still like in the classroom face to face, like, wouldn't it have been amazing for it to be like a maker space type of activity where they could actually build together? Is that that was probably your hope, right, Amber?
Yeah, that was the hope. Last year we did a big project at the end of the year in the classroom, not distance, obviously, where we designed food trucks. And so we had this whole array of different food trucks, and they had to do all the thinking for budget and advertising and whatnot. And so we invited all the other classes to come tour through. So it was a lot of fun, and that was the goal for this project as well. But it ended up being photos or videos on a Google slide, but it's something.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And that's great, including the photos, including the videos. At this time, that's kind of really what our reality is. But I love the idea of the food truck unit because I'm telling you, I think I have it in my notes somewhere written down about doing something like that as well. And then you just said, you guys did the budget on it. You did the advertising, so obviously you have some type of opinion-like or persuasive writing going on. So very much.
It was a whole packet. I ended up getting it off Teachers Pay Teachers. It was like the best thing I ever bought.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Amber. So that's kind of the gist of, those experiences that we're trying to provide to our students, and remembering again the routine and structure, but having fun in the meantime with that, because that's what the students are really going to remember. So routine and structure, obviously, for them to get through the day, for their family to understand what is needed for them to complete. But then how are we going to take it to that next level where they're going to experience grand learning such as food truck designing and or theme park designing. I love it. Does anybody have any questions or any comments that they want to add in at this time?
I don't, Heather, but I wanted to thank you very much. This was really, really great.
Oh,
I'm walking away with a bunch of new ideas, so I appreciate that.
I know. See, I love attending sessions no matter what, because there's always something that you can pull away, right, and take back. Love it.
Yep. That's how you know it's a good session, right?
Exactly.
So thank you.
You're welcome. And then your mind kind of starts twirling all over the place, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you again for attending. I know we're ending 4 minutes, but that's okay because, right, we need to get to our families. It's almost 5 o'clock, and I know you guys all have busy days. And I think, Karen, you're like, how many hours ahead of us? 3, correct? New Jersey?
Yeah, it's going on, I guess, 8 o'clock? No.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's time for you to unwind.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming, you guys. And I'm not sure if you'll be here with me on Friday as well, but we have some good stuff in store on Friday as well. Take care and have a great night.